Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. This is Season 4, episode number 19, our first of the playoffs. Today is Monday, May the 8th, 2017. I'm Graham. We also have Melissa and Tyler, as per usual. We are in the playoffs, as I said. So we're already through one round of the playoffs. That only took a couple hours. As I'm sure anybody listening to this show already knows, Toronto beat New England in the Eastern semifinal, and Colorado beat Vancouver. And we are here to break down what was awesome and not awesome about those games. There's pretty much no other news going on, obviously no trades or free agent signings or anything like that. So we will get right to the games. And Tyler, why don't you go first? Can't hear Tyler.
Oh, how about push the right button? Okay, sorry. Not my usual setup. My first awesome of the week is going with Callum Crawford and the effort he put out against the Stealth in that mammoth victory. I think he had 3 goals, but in general, also had many times where he was just killing the shot clock all by himself and was a huge difference maker for the mammoth offense. And it really hurt the Stealth when the ball was in Callum's stick and he could do whatever he wanted, and he did throughout that game. So congratulations to Callum. I can give him congratulations because he is a former Stealth going back to 2007. So we'll give him a little bit of grace on this one, but I don't like it. Do it against somebody else, please. So that was my first awesome. What do you have, Melissa?
So I'm going for the opposite team as well. I actually want to talk about Logan Chess's second quarter goals that were just ridiculous. He was at the crease, which that's not a player you want to let near the crease anyway, but they were both just one-handed, just these laser hard bounce into the crease. It was just crazy. And he did 2 of them within 5 minutes, I think, of one another. It was just, okay, the first one was okay, and then he does it again, and you're just like, holy cow. So that was definitely my first awesome, because it was one of those just jaw-dropping goals that you're like, wait, how did he do that? Because it looked so precise, and it was one-handed, and it had so much speed and power on it that it looked like he had both hands full power on it. It was awesome. What about you, Graham? What's your first awesome?
All right. My first awesome, I'm going to go with Brandon Miller. Considering he played 67 minutes this entire season, he wasn't in the lineup at all for about the first 2/3 of it. And then I don't think he started any games. He played backup in a few of them, but like I said, 67 minutes total the whole season. He played 47 in this game. And he allowed one just a few minutes after coming in at the end of the first, and then nothing in the second quarter at all. And then scattered 5 over the second half. And the last one was about 7 seconds left in the fourth quarter, and it really didn't mean anything to anybody. So obviously Miller came up big when their team really needed him. Rose didn't start off so great, so yeah, they pulled Rose after I think it was only 5 goals, and Miller did the rest and kept the team in the game and gave him a chance to win. And good job for Brandon Miller. Tyler, what's up?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with that game and kind of echo that point. In general, the Rock performance was most impressive. 18 goals, an 8-goal victory in a playoff against a team where they barely got the advantage over them. So they should be pretty evenly matched. But when it came down to it, the Rock were better prepared and drastically outperformed the Black Wolves in that game on Saturday. And I was impressed that they can make it not even be close, even with Nick Rose getting chased. I guess maybe it was close to the end, and then they really – it's one of those times where the team responds to the goalie change. But an 8-goal win in a playoff game, 2 teams that are otherwise evenly matched, was a very impressive effort by the Rock. What do you have, Melissa?
I have the Stealth showing that you should never count them out. That it doesn't matter how big of a lead and how little time is left. They can be a very, very dangerous team. And the Mammoth very nearly found out exactly how dangerous, considering the score was only 1 goal difference. And it really wasn't that close with 5 minutes remaining. So the Stealth really almost took that game away. And so it was a little crazy, little nerve-wracking to watch. So way to go, Stealth, showing that do not count them out. What about you, Graham?
All right, I'm going to go back to the Rock game again. And considering they scored 18 goals, I'm going to go with the transition and defense. I think I said once early in the season when the Rock, I don't think they were 3-0, but they played really well in their first 3 or 4 games. And I remember wondering, okay, well, we didn't know about Tom Schreiber at the time. We didn't know about Kieran McArdle at the time. And we thought, okay, well, we just lost Josh Sanderson and Colin Doyle. What's the offense going to be like? But as long as the transition keeps scoring the way they're scoring, it may not matter all that much. And it turned out that the Rock offense was just fine, thanks. And the transition had a good year as well. And this game was sort of a microcosm of that, in that the offense was just fine, thanks. And the transition was great. Brody Merrill played very well. Damon Edwards had a great game. Jesse Gamble. They had 5 goals between them and a couple of assists. And I thought on the defensive end, Latrell Harris and Bradley Cree also had really good games. At one point, Latrell Harris was assigned to Sean Evans, which is not all that easy to do in the first place. And I don't remember if Evans was killing a penalty or not, but for whatever reason, he had the ball down in the corner, and Harris just had him pinned against the wall or against the boards, and Evans was moving this way and that, trying to get away, and basically Harris, not by himself, I think at some point they ended up double teaming Evans, but the two of them just let him, just trapped him there. He couldn't move, he couldn't get anywhere, he couldn't get the ball to anybody, and they killed the entire clock. And so I thought the Rock defense played a very impressive game. Tyler, you're next.
Sure. I'm going to go with the crowd at the Stealth game. In my experience, the first week of playoffs is the hardest time for teams to get people to show up, and the Stealth did it. Were growing their attendance from over the last few weeks and kept that trend moving forward. And so I'm very impressed with them to do that and get people out and have that sense of excitement. It was in the crowd, mostly in favor of Stealth too. It also helps they were playing Colorado, who have BC-based players, and always bumps the attendance when they're in town as well. But 4,100 in that arena on a 1 week's notice, when nobody knew for sure the game was going to be there until the game ended the week before. That was, and it was a road game, so they weren't even there to see it happen. It's hard to get that message out to people, but they got butts in the seats, and it was a good effort by them. How about you, Melissa? Melissa, sorry.
So my next one is Ty Belanger and Dylan Ward. They both made some just really impressive saves, and they made it look easy at times, which, looking at the offensive players that both these teams had, it wasn't. It's a little harder to say what it was like with the Toronto New England game, just because that became so dominant. I don't know that it was fully the goalies there, but it was really awesome just watching Ward and Belanger just face off again. And even though the Stealth were so dominant all season against the Mammoth, the Mammoth turned the tables this time. So kind of follow up awesome. What about you, Graham?
All right, my third and final awesome for this week. I'm going to go with Corey Small. The end of regulation in the New England game, Small came up big. He had the game tying goal, and then he had the game winning goal in overtime. And if I'm not mistaken, he had 1 or maybe even 2 more in the fourth quarter of that game as well. And then we get to the Colorado game, and he has all of Vancouver's 4 goals in the fourth quarter, including a natural hat trick with 3 minutes left in the game. And I mean, he and the team couldn't get that last goal to tie it up, to send it to overtime. But just the fact that they were in the game that close to the end was pretty much entirely because of Corey Small. At least at that end, there was certainly good plays at the defensive end. But in terms of the offense, it was entirely small in the fourth quarter, and definitely some clutch play there. Didn't result in a win, but got him about as close as possible. And so good job to Corey Small. There was actually a bunch of talk this week on why Corey Small should be the MVP, even though he wasn't. He was, I guess, third in the league in scoring. And we did our MVP voting, and I think all three of us came up with Lyle Thompson. I didn't actually check that, but I think we all did. But I certainly had Small in my short list. I think I had him third. But there were good points made in that. Given the offense on the Georgia Swarm, losing Lyle Thompson wouldn't have been as devastating as losing Corey Small would have been for the Stealth, and I can certainly buy that. Same with Mark Matthews on the Rush. Losing him would be bad, but Small had a greater impact on the Stealth, and without Small, the Stealth wouldn't have made the playoffs, whereas the Rush and the Swarm likely would have. So I'm not sure I'm ready to change my pick for MVP, but I can certainly buy that Corey Small is definitely a worthy candidate.
Yeah, I remember I had Corey Small listed for something as a very potential candidate. He wasn't my top choice, but he definitely needed to be in consideration for pretty much the same reasons you just said, that he really was a huge impact on that Stealth offense, and he was just as up there on the score sheet, but I think because some bigger names were overshadowing him, and the fact that the Stealth had a rough patch, he was just really being overlooked. So we definitely discussed him pretty well, and most of the points I think you mentioned.
All right, Tyler, you're next.
Yeah, I'm out of awesomes. How about you, Melissa, before we move on to not awesomes?
I think anything else that I would add, we've already covered. So
Okay.
I can go on to the not awesome.
Sure. Then let me see. My first not awesome would be, it hurts to call out people individually because kind of feel bad about the situation, but Reese Touch's performance on Saturday with 2 assists and the biggest playoff games Stealth have had in forever, and their first playoff game in the last 4 years, and he quote unquote didn't show up. With just the 2 assists, he had not a impact that they needed to win that game. Like 1 goal from him would have tied it. 2 goals from him, which is probably at least as even maybe below his average, like probably has 2 point something per game. 2 goals and he hits his average, and then the Stealth are winning that game. So that was a very hard part for me to see, as Small was carrying the team and the team was fighting to get back in the game. It's like it wasn't because of Reese, and I hopefully it's just maybe some sort of injury, so it's something that can come back from. But it was a bummer to see that output at the time the Stealth needed it most this year. What do you have, Melissa, for a not awesome?
So my first not awesome is my usual complaint, NLL TV not putting the games up in a timely manner. We were going to record yesterday, but unfortunately somebody was getting ready to travel, so we postponed for today, which is good because the game was actually available today, whereas yesterday it wasn't, and so I was able to watch the Mammoth Stealth game. But when 50% of the games aren't available to watch, like, what the hell? Especially with a 1-goal game, everybody wants to watch that one that didn't. Just not acceptable, especially since there was only 2 games. You can't say, well, there was just too much going on. It was 2 games. Get it up in a timely fashion so we can watch it. So that's my first not awesome. But at least I was able to watch it, so not wholly as bad as it would have been yesterday. What about you, Graham?
So it turned into a medium not awesome as opposed to a completely not.
Yes.
All right, my first one, I guess, is kind of the same. It's kind of a somewhat awesome and somewhat not awesome, and that's just attendance in general. And I'm going to echo a bit of what Tyler said about the Stealth. They had a little over 4,000 people at that game, which is their highest this season and the 7th highest ever in Vancouver in the 4 years they've been there. So that's pretty good. It would have been nice to see a sellout in Vancouver. And I started doing the calculations and not so much calculations, but somebody, I think it was Sean Pollock, tweeted in Canada they should not have a problem filling a 5,500 seat arena for lacrosse. And there's certainly arguments to be made for that. Greater Vancouver area has a population of about 2.5 million. So 5,500 is a pretty small percentage of that. But then you look at the Rock, and Greater Toronto area has a population of about 6.7 million. And the Rock had 6,200, a little over, just under 6,300 of that game, which is a far smaller percentage. So, yeah, it would have been nice to see a sellout in Vancouver. But as you said, Tyler, they only had a week to prepare. But in that week, they managed to get out their biggest crowd of the season. So good job to the Stealth. On the other hand, the Rock had their worst attendance in team history. And team history is now 15, 16, 17 years now. 18 years now, I think about it. This is 2017. They started in 99. So they have never had a crowd that low, and it's 1,500 lower than the previous lowest. So it's not like they just broke it by a little bit. They had nobody. So, yeah, Rock attendance was definitely not awesome. It's been going down for several years, and I've written a couple of articles about it, and it's disappointing, and it's a little nerve-wracking because at some point, you got to imagine, and I know Jamie Dowlick is a huge lacrosse fan, and he loves this team, and he's clearly been willing to dump money into it for the last however many years he's owned the team, which is probably close to 10 years now. But at some point, he's either going to run out of money or run out of patience and just say, look, I can't keep doing this, and move them to the Ricoh Center or some other smaller venue someplace, maybe, I don't know where else they'd go. But wherever they go, they're certainly going to get fewer people than they have at the ACC, but it'll be way cheaper. So maybe if they only get Vancouver-sized crowds out there, he doesn't lose as much money, and things are okay. But it'll be sad for Rock fans if that kind of thing happens, and even sadder if he just says, "Look, I can't do this anymore. I have to sell the team, or have to move the team somewhere else." And unless he moves it to Hamilton, which is 5 kilometers from me, it's gonna suck. So I'm hoping something can be done. Maybe get new advertising people in, get new marketing people in. I have no idea about that sort of thing, so I can't give any kind of advice, but something needs to change, because 6,200 people at a playoff game is certainly not awesome. Tyler, you're next.
Sure. I'm going to go into a stat right now that actually surprised me. I don't even know how to clarify it as awesome, not awesome, or just surprising. But as I was watching that Stealth Mammoth game, whenever they needed it, I saw the Mammoth get the loose balls. And I thought that was really, aside from Reese, the big difference, that the Mammoth always had the ball. They were able to get it most of the time. Then I checked the stats on Sunday, and the Stealth actually won the loose ball battle by 1, and I have no idea how that even happened. It did not appear that way, did not feel that way as the game was happening. But it was really even match because there's only a difference of 1 out of 111. So,
yep, that's right.
And I was surprised by that. I really thought that they had been dominated on the loose balls, and it was one of the factors in them being down so much in the fourth quarter. Maybe they had that late surge as part of their scoring surge, was getting all the loose balls when they needed them. But I usually harp on that in all situations of lacrosse. You get the loose balls and you win. But it also led me to discover a few things about the NLL website, and this is clearly not awesome. If you look at the game stats, they'll do a comparison of goals, face-offs, shots, and they highlight or they bold the better number. So if you have more goals, you get bold. If you look at loose balls, whatever system they're using actually highlights less. So the site is set up where the team that has less loose balls did better. So that's something that they should fix. And secondly, I can't find loose ball information during a game at all. I think it may be a little harder to do, but somebody's tracking them somewhere, and they don't make it easy to find anymore. They don't have those stat sheets like they used to. That maybe they had a bunch of information, but it was all the information I was used to finding, and now I find less available to me during the game until afterwards when they publish stuff. Or maybe I don't know where to look, which is another bad sign of website design. But I want them to fix those things, and I want the stealth to be better at loose balls. I think across the season they had like 100 less than the Mammoth when I was looking at the stats heading into the game. So they need to get better at loose balls. If you own a loose ball, then you can control pretty much all aspects of the game. And so please do that as a focus point this offseason stealth. All right, over to you, Melissa.
So going to the stats thing, I know a few people that have just been going to Point Street directly to get the stats that we used to have accessible to us on the NL site that was so nice with the box score and stuff. Because while the website looks nice, the stats are just kind of worthless and overall because we're not getting all the stats that we want.
I think there is a way if you go to the individual game page, even when it's in progress, and you get the fancy scrolling thing that's telling you what's happening, but it's minimal actual stats. There is a link on there somewhere, and then I'd have to go look to find it, that gives you sort of the current box score, and then refreshing the page updates the box score. But it's not obvious. It's not easy to find. Yeah. So there is a way to find it. I do remember looking for it during a game, either last weekend or the weekend before. And I had to work a little bit to find it, but it was there someplace.
Well, I don't think that was there 2 weeks ago. I do think that was a recent addition because I noticed that last week when we did the podcast, but I know it wasn't there the week before because I was clicking on literally anything and everything trying to find my stats. So the option definitely wasn't there in the menu. But that's actually not my not awesome, now that we've kind of digressed a little bit. My not awesome kind of is the counterpoint to my awesome about the stealth. Watching my Mammoth have a 5-goal lead with about 5 minutes left and nearly blowing the game again. Like, seriously, it was such a nail biter. I don't know what happened, if they just thought the league was safe, which anyone who's watched this league knows that no lead is safe. We've watched several teams this season with just a few minutes remaining score just hella goals. So you know that 5-goal lead isn't safe. A 10-goal lead might not be safe with 5 minutes left. A little safer, but we've seen some just crazy goals. We've seen teams do 3 goals in 30 seconds. We've seen that kind of crazy stuff. So for them to almost sit back a little bit, and maybe that was coaching, I don't know what was going on. It just seemed like they had we're good, let's just kill the clock mentality, and it just really seemed to backfire. So I felt like they were giving the stealth offense entirely too much room. They were able to get way too clean of shots off against Ward that they really shouldn't have. It was just, it was frustrating to watch. It was the team that I've just gotten used to and kind of expected was going to show up. Thankfully, they didn't show up most of the game. It was just that little quarter, but they went from a 5-goal lead to a 1-goal lead. And so they really eked out this win by the skin of their teeth. And that is so not awesome because I'm supposed to be excited because, hey, my team just made it to past the first round for only the second time ever. Or maybe it's the third. We had some discussion on that because their first season, their away games, closed out the season, and then we went into playoffs, and so in my brain they're a little fuzzy. I just remember watching all of it at the Blue Sky Grill with a whole lot of other fans, and awesome experience, but the games themselves are fuzzy, and so I don't remember if there was a second round that they made it to, or I think they made it past the first round and then lost to Calgary in the second, but I'm not positive on that, but I'm sure Graham is finding the stats for us. So
in 2003 and 2004 they made the semifinals. And they lost to Toronto in 2003. They lost to Calgary in 2004. But in 2004, there was only one round, so never mind. So in 2003, they played 2 playoff games. They beat Vancouver, and then they lost to Toronto.
So yeah, they played the Ravens.
And other than that, they go out in the first round.
So yeah, for the most part, because the first season that the Mammoth were in, there was actually 3 divisions, and it was a whole different playoff scenario set up. But the first time since 2006, regardless, like since 2006, my team has made it to the second round of the playoffs. I should be ecstatic. And yet I'm looking forward to next week's game going, okay, so how bad are the Mammoth going to blow it against the Rush? Because that's the way this team has shown up.
It does seem weird that you seem less excited about your team winning than Tyler does about his team losing.
It is kind of sad. But it's been really hard because some of their best seasons, I watched this team still lose in that first game. 2007, as we've discussed multiple times, that was a little bit of a fluke, and there was some ref involvement there. But they still may have lost. So that's not really the argument. It was a bad call from a ref who definitely was biased, and not just against our team. Like, he showed bias against other teams too. But it's 2017, and so we have not made it past the first round since 2006. I should be ecstatic and can't wait. And we're gonna beat the Rush, and instead I'm just like, I hope we don't embarrass ourselves. So yeah, that's kind of my not awesome that I'm a little frustrated with my team at the moment. So what about you, Graham?
My next one, I was going to go with what happened to Reese Dutch, but Tyler pretty much covered that. Corey Small had 6 goals. Logan Schuss had 9 points. And I looked it up. Reese Dutch averaged 2.25 goals per game this season. So even if he'd shown up at 50%, that ties the game. But as I said, Tyler mentioned most of that. So I'm going to go to Melissa mentioned the starting goalies in the Vancouver-Colorado game were both awesome. That wasn't the case in the other game. Neither Evan Kirk nor Nick Rose had great games. Rose was pulled after 12 minutes, as I mentioned before. Just didn't seem to be seeing the ball very well. And I'm actually kind of surprised they made the move that quickly, considering that Rose was the guy all season long. But it was a good decision, obviously, is because Brandon Miller played great. But Evan Kirk didn't have a great game either. And it seemed to me that they left him in too long, and then they took him out too quickly. So it was a little weird. But I would have thought about the 10th goal, which was in the third quarter or thereabouts. It was clear, okay, Kirk is not seeing things very well. There were a couple of sort of softies that went in before that. And that was about the time that they should have pulled him, because it was still only earlier mid third quarter. They had lots of time to make up the difference. Instead, that by the time they pulled him, it was like 15-9, and midway or later through the fourth quarter. And so it's like, okay, well, what's the point of pulling him now? Unless the only thing I figured was they were hoping that Doug Jamieson would go in there and make some really good saves that they needed, and that would spur the team on and say, okay, good, now we're set in goal, let's go and get the offense going and win this. But even if that had happened, they barely had time to do that unless they wanted to go out and score like 7 goals in 4 minutes or some crazy thing, which is possible, as we've seen, but not likely, especially given the way the Rock had been playing up till then. But if you're going to do that to try to swap goalies to shake up your offense, why not do that a little earlier when you've got time for the offense to actually make that, actually do that? So they seemed to leave him in too long, and then by the time they swapped him out, it seemed to be too late to make any difference. So I kind of didn't understand what the Black Holes were doing there. But in any case, the goaltending, starting goaltending, in any case, for both of those teams was not awesome. All right, Tyler, do you have any more?
I am all out not awesomes. I think 2 is enough for the 2 games, even though I only talked about one of the 2 games. Good job there in Toronto, everybody.
All right, Melissa, you done as well?
Yeah, I think I had enough of a soapbox rant, so we're good.
All right, so let's move on to our predictions. And just for something different, I am in the lead. Now, small sample size, but I'm going to take it anyway. I got one of the games right. I picked Toronto over New England, and nobody picked Colorado over Vancouver. So I'm 1-1, and you guys are both 0-2. And so we will move on to our division finals. And as I said last week or 2 weeks ago, we have picked, and I guess I should clarify that with you guys, that you made your picks based on this. We have picked the winner of the series, not the winner of game one. And since I'm winning, I get to go first, and I'm all excited. Okay, Toronto, Georgia. And I gotta start off on kind of a sucky note. Being a Rock fan, I have to pick Georgia. I can see the Rock winning one of these two games. I mean, they split the season series. Both games went to overtime. It looks like of all the teams, and I didn't check this to see who, if anybody, beat the Swarm more than once. But let me see if I can get that. They lost to Colorado, Calgary, New England, Toronto, and Rochester. And that wasn't my point anyway, because Toronto didn't beat them more than once. But anyway, yeah, I can see Toronto winning one of these games. But I think in a series, I'm not sure if I'd take anybody over Georgia in a multi-game series. And if Saskatchewan and Georgia both win this round, then that'll be put to the test, because I'm not sure who to pick. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I'm gonna have to go with Georgia in the second round to win the East. And Colorado, Saskatchewan, same sort of thing. Colorado can beat Saskatchewan. I think they did beat Saskatchewan actually in one game this year, and they beat them by 3. And then Saskatchewan beat Colorado by 1 in each of the other 3 games. So Saskatchewan wins the season series. But again, in a series, I'm gotta go with the Rush, and so I guess I'm picking a Georgia-Saskatchewan final, which I probably would have picked for any of the last 6 weeks or so. And you guys are both tied at 0-2, but Tyler, you won the regular season, so you got the tiebreaker there. So Tyler, what do you think?
All right. Yeah, I did all that work for 18 weeks to pick second today. The Toronto-Georgia series, a lot of reasons Georgia's favored. Nobody's beat them twice, like you said. They only lost 5 games all season. But Toronto has a lot of players with experience. Experience during the regular season is nice, but experience really matters in the playoffs. And being able to handle tight games, being able to handle the pressure. And there's a chance there that Toronto can handle it. And Georgia, when pressed in the run and gun, don't care, they're fine. But in a pressure situation, what might happen? And there's enough of a chance there. And the fact that I didn't win any games last week, I'm picking Toronto. Not with a ton of certainty, but I think of the 2 series, if there's going to be an upset, this is the one where I'm most likely to see it. And so I'm going to go ahead and go with the Toronto winning that series against Georgia. They only play each other twice in a regular season. A lot of other teams play each other many times. Colorado and Vancouver play each other 4 times. Buffalo and Toronto play each other 4 times. We got a small sample set, and they split. So we don't entirely have a good sense of how great or what the matchups are with Toronto and Georgia here. Out west, Luce used the word west with Saskatchewan all the way in the middle. But Saskatchewan and Colorado, Colorado kind of squeaked by Vancouver, and the Rush had a week to get ready, and they have the pedigree, 2 straight championships, going for a 3rd. Not easy to do, but they've got the team to do it. So I'm going to have them advancing into the finals. And not a lot to say about it there. I think that they're kind of heavily favored. And so I want them to go do their thing. What are your picks, Melissa?
All right. So I'm the same with Graham this week. With Georgia and Toronto, it's tough because when they play, they're pretty much 50-50. We don't have a lot to go on. But Georgia's been doing really good. And I think if this was just a 1-game series, I think I might pick Toronto here, especially since Georgia has had a week off. We've definitely seen some teams that actually does impact them, having that week off playing a team that wasn't off. But I think Georgia is just really solid this season. And, I'm gonna kind of cheer them on because I do like the way they've been playing all season. But Toronto's not going to be an easy opponent, so I don't expect this to be any kind of a blowout. I wouldn't be surprised if we're seeing overtime and definitely that third match game. With the Rush in Colorado, like I said earlier, I just hope my team doesn't embarrass themselves. Because you cannot give the Rush any of the kind of space that they were giving the Stealth or some of their previous opponents lately. The Rush will take full advantage. And if anything, that might be a bigger concern, is that the Rush might do that to the Mammoth. But if this was a one and done, maybe I might have a little more confidence in my team. But with the 2 games plus the potential match game, no, I'm going to pick Rush every time right now. The Mammoth are too inconsistent. So even if the Rush stumble in one of those games, I fully expect them to take the other in the match game. So yeah, I think we're going to be seeing a Georgia Rush final, and kind of excited for that one actually. So you want to close this out, Graham?
All right. Yeah, I guess Melissa and I are, I don't want to say voting for, but that's what we picked for our predictions, a Georgia-Saskatchewan final, though personally I would have no problem with a Toronto-Saskatchewan final. But that'll do it for us for this week. We will be back next week to discuss the middle of the second round. And we will see you then. So this has been another episode of Addicted to Lacrosse. For Tyler and Melissa, I'm Graham. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.